Chapter 1001 Summoning. The summer heat was oppressive. Cicadas screaming their lungs out in the trees outside, though the air conditioning hummed a cool counterpoint, and the lecturer spoke with enthusiastic animation. The students below were predictably polarized. Some propped their chins on their hands, yawning incessantly, blinking away the encroaching sleep. Others had simply surrendered, heads resting on their desks, emitting soft snores. However, was entirely apart from this dichotomy. A third-year medical student at National Western University, he looked utterly exhausted. His face and neck bore clear, angry red welts, his hair showed signs of scorching, and a white bandage encircled his forehead. A strong smell of antiseptic clung to him, making him seem as though he'd recently survived a serious car accident. For some reason, Duyuki's expression was profoundly listless, as if he'd just been unceremoniously rejected by a girl. He appeared to be half-heartedly listening to the lecture, but his eyes were unfocused, drifting to a point about 30 centimeters in front of him on his desk. Even the yawning student next to him would have sworn was nothing there but a textbook on anatomy. A hand would have felt nothing. Yet for Duyuki a bizarre, small object existed there, radiating an aura of primordial chaos, mystery, and something utterly uncanny, reminiscent of a legendary altar. This altar was strangely shaped, about the size of a washbasin. It resembled a monstrous claw, clawing upwards from nothingness, its tendons and bones starkly visible, a vivid crimson. Strange electrics crackled around it, appearing and vanishing erratically. The claw possessed only 3 toes, tipped with long, black, sharp talons. Thick, dark green scales covered its surface, exuding a primitive, untamed. At the center of the upward, reaching claw was a strange symbol, looking like both script and sigil, commanding awe and reverence. Each time the altar appeared, it resonated strangely with a mysterious red scar on Duyuki's chest. This was likely why he alone could see and touch it, while others treated it as non-existent. Suddenly, the claw-shaped altar made a slow clenching motion, light shining from the gaps between its clenched fingers, finally solidifying into several black objects. A piece of information then naturally surfaced in Duyuki's mind. Tarakuta member Faye offered 5 hard-baked black breads as a sacrifice, hoping for a creature to accompany her in a short, ordinary battle, contract-type slave. Do you wish to answer this summons? With the appearance of this information, the claw-shaped altar in front of Duyuki opened again, returning to its previous shape. In its palm, 5 hard-baked black breads appeared. These were less like bread and more like bricks, dry and unappetizing, likely to break teeth on the first bite. About a minute later, the 5 hard-baked black breads slowly disappeared, as if evaporating into the air. Another piece of information appeared. Heddle Clan's Little Crick answered Tarakuta member Faye's summons. The contract has been successfully established. After about 10 seconds, the claw-shaped altar clenched and then opened again, revealing a rather dilapidated and old badge in its palm. Xuanhuan Society summoner Li Lan offered a magician Lin's seal as a sacrifice, hoping for a creature to answer her summons. Contract type equal. Do you wish to answer this summons? Duyuki's eyes flickered, blankly staring at the seal. Though dilapidated, it had a certain historical weight, the appearance of an aged antique, probably worth some money, at least far more than those black breads. However, after a full 120 seconds, there was no response, and the badge simply vanished. No creature showed interest in the offering. The summoning failed, and the summoning apprentice's mana decreased. Next, something else appeared on the altar. Pant, a priest of the GBL sect, offered a horn from a minotaur. A fierce storm raged outside, and a frost tiger was stewing over the fireplace. But the firewood ran out just then. Oh, to have any fire elemental squat under the stove for an hour! I'd be eternally grateful. Pant specified the summoning of a single fire elemental to assist in cooking, requesting one with a docile temperament and patience. An immature fire elemental immortal of the Yadian clan answered the call. Immediately afterward, the altar once again repeated its clenching and opening movement. In a flash of light, a uniquely shaped stick appeared, along with a crystal that looked crystalline and translucent, like a red agate. Elder of Natural Will, Hemos, offered a small red crystal and a Mosai Eastern stick, crystalline electric high-energy version, specifying the summoning of a single goblin warrior, requiring at least second-order strength and proficiency in the following core abilities: continuous throwing, ice bolt, contract type slave. More than 10 goblin warriors met the criteria and answered the call. Therefore, the 5 strongest were selected and offered to the summoner, Hemos, for his choice. Gazing at the translucent, ruby red crystal, Duyuki was instantly overwhelmed by painful memories. He plunged his fingers into his hair, pressed his forehead against his desk, his whole body trembling slightly. After a long moment, he groaned, "Oh, will this ever end? Can't you just leave me alone?" Chapter 02 The Spare Tira's Plight. It all started 10 days ago. Like most guys, Duyuki longed for a pure, innocent romance, though a less innocent one would be even better in his college life. He had a major crush on Xuanhuan, a senior in the chemical engineering department. Their relationship, however, remained platonic. He was always on call, buying her gifts, readily available for favors like moving furniture or fixing computers. But the moment he broached the topics of holding hands, kissing, or anything more intimate, the goddess would instantly revert to her ice maiden persona, rejecting him outright. In short, Little Do was nothing more than a spare tire. Several close friends urged him to give up, assuring him that there were plenty of fish in the sea, suggesting dating apps. But people sometimes do foolish things. Duyuki still believed that even though the road was long and winding, his future was bright. He thought the goddess would eventually be moved by his devotion, so he persevered. 3 days ago on the eve of Kixi Festival, the senior somehow offended a professor in her department and was punished with cleaning the chemistry lab after class that afternoon. However, she had a date that evening to watch her rich boyfriend play tennis and have dinner with him. The cleaning would take a considerable amount of time, surely ruining her plans. What to do? Naturally, it was time for the spare tire to step up. Naturally, when the goddess called, Yuki immediately dropped his rest time and selflessly went to work for her. Cleaning the chemistry department's lab, he even lured his best friend, Zhou Chuyu, with the promise of a meal. The two weren't unfamiliar with the lab, as they had a pharmaceutical chemistry course in medical school. As soon as they entered, they started working hard, sweeping up a huge pile of trash. The most bizarre thing was that they found a Durex condom tucked away in some unknown corner, which led to a lengthy examination by the two single guys, filled with disdainful remarks, yet secretly envious of whoever had managed to get it on in such a place. As the two sat at a desk, taking a smoke break, things took a turn. Yuki suddenly noticed something was off. Initially, he thought it was his eyes, but after a while, he realized that there was a strange, rippling effect in the space above the lecture platform. Then, before their very eyes, a beast claw altar slowly materialized. In the palm of the altar, 3 translucent, glass-like small crystals were stacked in a tripartite formation. Though small, the crystals contained a golden, viscous substance resembling jelly, pulsing with the semblance of life. These crystals were unlike anything on Earth. If a comparison were necessary, they were like golden diamonds combined with jelly, bathed in the radiant glow of the setting sun. This is unbelievably beautiful! Unbelievably beautiful! Both men's cigarettes simultaneously dropped from their lips. They were instantly captivated by the golden crystals. Pure gold has always been an instinctively appealing color to humanity. Otherwise, why has gold, something inedible and unsuitable for weapons, been a precious commodity and currency throughout human history, transcending race and gender for millennia? In that moment, their brains went blank. Instinctively they slowly reached out, wanting to touch the strange, suddenly appeared golden crystals. The moment Yuki touched the golden crystal shard, a surge of information flooded his mind. You have touched the offering, responding to the summons of Mingxi the summoner, a member of the Children of Lammas. You have become a summon for the first time. The message abruptly cut off here. Immediately afterward, both of them saw a monstrous hand appear out of thin air as if transcending time and space, reaching for the golden crystal shard. This hand was at least the size of a door, its black skin marked with green stripes forming bizarre patterns, each seeming to contain immense, mysterious power. Its glass-like fingernails shone, sharp and menacing, like the claws of a tiger or leopard. The hand possessed only 4 fingers, lacking a thumb and any discernible difference between the middle finger, etc. The knuckles were swollen, the fingers slender and identical in appearance. A jagged wound marred the hand, gruesome and ragged, with flesh curling back in a painful display. The blood, however, didn't flow freely, instead coalescing into mercury-like globules desperately trying to retract into the wound. Unlike human blood, it resembled crimson lava. Just as the hand was about to grasp the crystal, a black hole-like portal erupted in the chemistry lab, roaring with a terrifying sound, its immense suction instantly pulling both Yuki and his companion, along with several tables and chairs. In that instant, Yuki felt a dizzying sensation, but as his fingertips first made contact with the golden crystal shard, an intense coolness spread through his body, a sensation so pleasant he almost groaned. At that moment, he could just barely make out, from the corner of his eye, that he was inside a bizarre, luminous tunnel. Around him, like a kaleidoscope, were distorted, elongated fragments shimmering with uncanny light. Even his vision and body felt strangely warped and stretched, spinning and moving at high speed. The enormous hand, having grasped at empty air, swiftly retracted and vanished into the void, leaving behind several drops of lava like crimson blood suspended in mid-air. These formed eerie, blood-red spheres, strangely translucent and crystalline in appearance. From the corner of his eye, Yuki even saw that the closest sphere was bubbling, as if boiling. Then, as if sensing something, these blood spheres flew directly towards Yuki. He was spinning rapidly in the air, completely weightless, and could only watch helplessly as the spheres approached, touching his skin and instantly melting into his body. Suddenly, an indescribable burning pain shot through Yuki's body. The explosive agony was far more than he could bear, instantly rendering him unconscious. Chapter 003 The Forest on the Tip of the Tongue. When Yuki awoke, he found that it was almost dark. He seemed to be in a dense forest, lush and tranquil, with fragrant flowers blooming everywhere, the grass a vibrant green. Numerous, enormous trees were scattered throughout. Those large enough for 4 or 5 people to embrace were commonplace. And ancient trees were a frequent sight. He had collapsed beside a gently flowing stream. His mouth tasted salty and fishy, his throat parched and burning. With great effort, he stood up, only to feel the world spin as a severe headache overwhelmed him. Fortunately, Yuki, a medical student and high achiever, knew something was wrong. He quickly sat back down, feeling much better. Touching his face, he discovered dried blood scabs around his nose, mouth and ears. He brushed them off, and they fell away in a shower of dust. Yuki caught his breath, slowly crawling to the stream. The water was crystal clear and he drank deeply. Splashing water on his face to revive himself, he checked his body and found, apart from a red scar on his chest, nothing unusual. Standing up and walking a few steps, he spotted something familiar. Several specialized laboratory tables from his lab. They had somehow been sucked into this strange place, likely by the sudden black hole. These heavy lab tables must have fallen from above, smashing 2 or 3 large trees before tumbling into the nearby grass. They were practically ripped apart, utterly wrecked. Judging by the 2 umbrellas stuck inside, the weather forecast must have predicted rain that day. Seeing this, Duyuki felt a chill run down his spine. He suddenly realized how incredibly lucky he was to be alive and relatively unscathed. Then, inexplicably, he felt ravenously hungry, as if he had eaten in a week. Duyuki had a hunch this was somehow connected to those blood cells that had merged with him. He searched through the wreckage of a nearby lab table, eventually finding a bag of Oreos amidst a chaotic jumble of chemicals and medicines, probably left behind by some snack-loving senior or junior. He munched on the cookies, observing his surroundings. Smoke rose in the west, leading him to a simple deduction: smoke means fire, and fire usually means people. Duyuki was still furious. More than anything, he wanted to find someone and demand answers. Had being a spare tire become such a heinous crime, so deserving of divine retribution? But there was no point dwelling on it. He needed to find people first. He began walking towards the smoke. As Duyuki trekked through the forest, a growing sense of unease, even dread, settled over him. Within just 400 or 500 meters, he encountered dozens of plants and insects he'd never seen before. Was this even Earth? What was even more unsettling was that upon seeing these bizarre creatures, things he'd never encountered in television, books, or any other media, information about them automatically appeared in his mind. For example, the slightly purplish, tender leaves beside him emitted a faint glow. Duyuki swore he'd never seen anything like it before. Yet the moment his eyes landed on them, information flooded his mind. Ramie flower leaves, edible, slightly bitter, with a stimulating effect on the nerves and concentration. Upon seeing them, Duyuki instinctively plucked a Ramie leaf and popped it into his mouth. Chewing. Only when the slightly bitter yet refreshing taste spread across his tongue did he realize what he'd done. Having eaten only a pack of Oreos, Duyuki pressed on, searching for food to fill his empty stomach. Fortunately, the forest seemed sparsely populated, and wild fruits abounded. He seemed innately familiar with them, despite never having been here before. He uncannily identified plants and fruits. His pace slowed naturally. These bilberries are excellent, sweet and sour, he murmured. So these small, yellowish-green fruits are called bilberries. This is called wild strawberry. Wow, compared to those chocolate-covered strawberries in the market, these are amazing. Now I know why things that have wild in their name taste so good. Like wild boar or wild chicken. Mountain grapes, these look more like purple apples than grapes. Whatever, let's eat them first, then have some refreshing rose hips to freshen my breath, like chewing gum. How on earth do I know all this? For some reason, as this question arose, Duyuki suddenly recalled the numerous crystalline, bright red blood orbs he'd seen in that strange passage. He vaguely remembered them rushing toward him before he lost consciousness, seemingly merging into his body. At this thought, a chill running down his spine, he carefully examined himself, finding only a red mark on his chest besides any wounds. Before finally relaxing, he felt an unprecedented surge of energy, an enhanced agility. He even felt like he was striding with vigor. The sky grew darker, prompting Duyuki to quicken his pace towards the smoke. After about 100 meters, the view opened up, revealing a gentle slope ahead. Sparse trees dotted the hillside, the rest covered in shrubs and grass, resembling an alpine meadow or pasture, with snow-capped mountains in the background. It almost felt like the Alps. Chapter 3004 Peril. From here, the source of the smoke was clearly visible, a severely damaged building. About 5 or 6 kilometers away, it looked like an explosion had occurred. There were no visible flames, only billowing black smoke. Even from a distance, its unique style was evident: simple, rugged, practical, with a modern metallic framework. In short, prioritizing functionality. Duyuki walked forward a few steps and noticed someone leaning against a rock. The person was turned away, one arm hanging limply, the other shielding their chest. The rock obscured the rest. Delighted to finally see another living person, Duyuki hurried over, eager to learn what had happened. However, when Duyuki approached and patted the person on the shoulder, they slumped to the ground, seemingly boneless. Only then did Duyuki see the person's face, eyes wide open, yet devoid of life. A horrific, gaping wound marred their chest, flesh torn and mangled, blood pouring out in a gruesome torrent. The tearing was so severe it had eviscerated them, pools of congealed blood forming beneath their body. The terrifying sight, the pungent stench of blood, blanked Duyuki's mind. He froze for a few seconds before jolting upright as if electrocuted, screaming and running until he reached the cover of the woods, collapsing into the shadows, gasping and violently vomiting. After a while, Duyuki regained some composure. With trembling hands, he plucked some mature Ramie leaves, their bitter taste overpowering, but he didn't care. The bitter, stimulating taste of the Ramie leaves quickly sharpened his mind. He forced himself to calm down, realizing he faced far more than a picturesque forest. He faced a terrifying mortal threat. Most people facing pressure succumb to negative emotions, despair, dejections. The greater the pressure, the more intense the negativity, but a few demonstrate exceptional resilience. Pressure fuels them, unlocking capabilities far exceeding their usual potential. Yuki was one of the few confronting death. He began to calm down and mature at an astonishing rate. Take a deep breath, stay calm, don't panic. In a completely unfamiliar forest with lethal threats, what I need most right now is information. The blood under the corpse has coagulated into large clots. Medical textbooks clearly state that at normal temperature, blood clots into small clumps in 6 to 12 minutes. For such a large amount of clotting to occur, at least an hour must have passed. That means the creature that killed this person left at least an hour ago. So this area is relatively safe. In other words, if the killer was still nearby, my panicked escape would have alerted it. If that's true, I'd be dead already. Therefore, the priority isn't a blind, aimless escape, but gathering intelligence. I need to return to the body, and I have nothing on me. I might even need to find something useful on the corpse. At the very least, I need to change out of these flip-flops. After careful consideration, Yuki cautiously returned to the corpse. Fortunately, as a medical student, he was used to dealing with corpses from his anatomy classes. After overcoming his initial fear, he adapted surprisingly quickly and began his examination. Made 80 centimeters tall, to bolster his courage and improve his memory. Yuki muttered as he examined the body. He was wearing sturdy, uniform-like work clothes. Similar to those worn by outdoor miners or oil field workers, he was muscular with calluses on his hands, suggesting physically demanding work. Judging by his toothwear, he was around 40 years old. He had a keyring. Only one fake. And not a knife wound. Let me see. The wound is more than 10 centimeters in diameter, located in the center of his chest and abdomen, penetrating both. The tearing is severe, which explains the extensive bleeding. At this point, Yuki fell into thought. Something's not right. That's it. With such a serious injury, he would die within 30 seconds. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be able to move after being injured. There are no signs of a struggle in the nearby grass, indicating he managed to crawl here after being injured before succumbing to his wounds. What does this mean? Either this person's physique far exceeds that of a normal person, allowing him to hold on until now, or he carries some kind of emergency medication, at least high concentration adrenaline or a cardiac stimulant. If it's the latter, I have to find it, because this medication could save my life. Yuki searched the area and found bloodstains on the fallen grass. Without a doubt, these were left by the injured person. He carefully followed the trail of blood, and after walking about 100 or 200 meters, he was stunned. Chapter 1005 Damaged mech. Before him stood what appeared to be a mech, about 3 meters, resembling the exoskeleton battle armor in the movie Avatar he had seen. The mech was lying crookedly against a large tree. One of its mechanical legs was completely severed, and its surface showed several dents. A large hole, about the size of a wash basin, gaped in the cockpit, emitting crackling sparks and pops, clearly very dangerous. Through the large hole, the internal mechanical structure was clearly visible. Scattered parts lay within a radius of tens of meters, and wisps of smoke curled from some of the metal breaches, emitting a pungent smell. Yuki observed for a while before cautiously approaching. Getting closer, his shock deepened. The tree the mech was leaning against was actually a monster. Its eyes, mouth, and nose were clearly visible. What appeared to be twisted branches were actually thick, sharp brown forelimbs. This thing, could it be a legendary tree spirit? Damn it, aren't these things only supposed to exist in medieval parchment records? Looking at the massive branches, Yuki immediately imagined how the hole in the mech's cockpit was formed. Clearly, the tree spirit's forelimb had pierced the cockpit with tremendous force, severely injuring the pilot. Then, with a flick of its limb, it flung the pilot out of the cockpit. This explains the wounds and horrific lacerations on the previous corpse. But the enormous Trent also appears lifeless, its leaves showing clear signs of withering. Yuki chained his hand, and immediately discovered that while the mech wasn't equipped with any weapons, its right arm had a massive chain-like chainsaw deeply embedded in the Trent's body. The damage was almost equivalent to being cut in half. Even with the Trent's powerful life force, it was unlikely to survive. Understanding this, Yuki's spirits lifted, carefully avoiding the sparking electricity. He circled the mech and found a nameplate on the cockpit. The characters weren't from Earth, but Yuki understood their meaning instantly. 88M Civilian Multi-Purpose Self-Propelled Vehicle Crystal Drive Version. External attachment carrier electric hybrid chainsaw civilian version. Self-weight 6.8 tons. Payload 21 tons. Maximum power 800 horsepower. Energy consumption 3 colorless small crystals 266 operating hours. Standing on the wrecked mech's head, Yuki looked around and noticed several areas that had been clearly felled. The sequence of events became clear. The deceased was likely a logging machine operator, whose job was to control this mech to fell trees. He probably didn't notice the lurking Trent, and was tragically ambushed. The cockpit pierced in a single blow. Simultaneously with the attack on the operator, the logging mech launched a counterattack. The Trent's slow movement was a clear weakness, and it was cut into by the chainsaw, resulting in a mutual kill. Yuki then found what he was looking for, a backpack, heavily stained with blood, presumably carried by the operator. It lay on the ground, carelessly opened, revealing a hidden compartment and a strangely shaped empty bottle. The bottle was about fist size, containing a trace of liquid. Yuki doctor sniffed it but couldn't identify the smell, and reluctantly put it down. The other contents of the backpack, however, were a pleasant surprise. Yuki guessed that the logging operator frequently worked in remote wilderness areas, and thus carried such a survival pack for emergencies. Aside from used first aid supplies, Most of the backpack's contents were urgently needed by Duyuki: a uniquely designed fire starter, a waterproof poncho, and rations. Finally, Duyuki found a machete on the mech, likely used for clearing paths through the dense forest. Although the blade wasn't sharp, the back was thick and felt sturdy in his hand, so he took it as a weapon. It was getting late, and Duyuki grew increasingly anxious, since such powerful and eerie trends existed in this strange forest, capable of easily defeating a powerful mech. Who could guarantee there weren't other dangerous creatures? With a gritted tooth, Duyuki determined his direction and continued towards the place billowing with smoke. His sense of crisis intensified. If he didn't reach there before dark, he'd be truly furious. Duyuki's fury was just a figure of speech, but for Mingxi it was a very real matter of coughing up blood. Little by little, Mingxi, a mere 15 years old, was a seemingly adorable and naive girl. However, her youth belied her exceptional abilities. Just a month prior, she had successfully completed the organization's Lamas test, summoning all elemental spirits: the beginner level Ice Nice, Aid Yan, and Semetek in a record-breaking 3:27 seconds. This speed shattered the centuries-old record of 4:1 seconds set by the great summoner, Poya, earning Mingxi a place in the organization's intensive training program. Passing the Lamas test usually grants a promotion to second-order summoner. However, due to her record-breaking performance, she was exceptionally promoted to a third-order elite within the organization. Note: first order is equivalent to level 10 in a game, second order is equivalent to level 20. Weapon and equipment rankings follow the same system. While the Lamasun organization, founded only a few decades ago, pales in comparison to giants like the Seven Gods Wings and Norton Tech, it's a rapidly rising force seemingly backed by powerful, unseen entities. It has somehow secured exclusive purchasing rights to special minerals from 2 major domestic regions. These special minerals include diamonds, bloodstones, aquamarines, obsidian, amethysts, soul crystals, and common terrarium stones. Chapter 106 in Origins. Although the output of these special minerals is low, their economic value is exceptionally high, making them crucial in the organization's internal trade. However, 6 months ago, the Lamasun organization noticed fluctuations in the output from one of the regions with exclusive purchasing rights, followed by a dramatic decline. After eliminating factors related to procurement and competition, the organization detected something amiss. Suspecting a problem within the region itself, and dispatched an investigation team. Mingxi, a highly valued prodigy, was selected to participate in this investigation, a crucial step in cultivating her independent operational capabilities. The region experiencing this issue was known many years ago by a single name: Grand Forest. Upon arriving, Mingxi and her team investigated, gradually narrowing down the scope until they pinpointed the problem to a specific area and target a mysterious new laboratory in the western part of Grand Forest. Anticipating potential trouble, the Lamasun organization dispatched significant reinforcements for protection, even going so far as to request the Moon Empress, Lina, to lead the team. The Lamas organization, while anticipating trouble, had utterly underestimated the scale of the impending disaster. Even with the Moon Empress, Lina, leading the team, they were ambushed upon entering the area by a horde of mutated monsters and several mysterious strongmen. Moon Empress Lina was immediately attacked by 2 mysterious figures. Despite instantly activating her magical shield, she was severely wounded and forced to teleport away using a decoy strawman. While powerful, summoning creatures takes time, and without that protection, her personal combat abilities are weak. She was relentlessly pursued by the 2 strongmen, her survival looking bleak. Then came the onslaught of frenzied mutated animals, and hidden snipers unleashed a volley of arrows. The hastily assembled Lamas defense line was on the verge of collapse, facing imminent annihilation. Mingxi concluded that only summoning the powerful 4th apostle, Conqueror Caecilius Projection, could turn the tide. However, summoning Caecilius Projection wasn't easy. It required at least a 5th-order summoner who had successfully completed the Moon Empress ritual to attract Caecilia's attention and control the powerful summoning ritual. Mingxi was only a 2nd-order summoner. Completing the ritual was impossible. When everyone thought Mingxi had lost her mind, she revealed her genius as an elite summoner. Gathering the 3 other summoners present, she drew an immature sacrificial summoning array based on her own research, began to preside over the ritual, and offered rare treasures, attempting a 4-person collaborative summoning of the powerful apostle Caecilius Projection. The ritual was incredibly difficult, establishing contact with Caecilius Projection exceptionally taxing. Yet, Mingxi lived up to her reputation, managing to initiate the arduous and obscure workings of the array. But at that moment, the enemy noticed and attempted to disrupt the summoning. Mingxi gritted her teeth and persevered, only to have the mysterious pursuer of Lina unleash a devastating ability: the Gaboga Fist! The Gaboga Fist requires the user to first use a hyperspace device to create a dimensional rift before summoning the fist. As soon as the rift appeared, it violently clashed with the immature summoning array, causing terrifying spatial turbulence and a spatial storm. The unexpected spatial storm immediately impacted the secret laboratory, destroying a small portion and causing it to billow with smoke. The mysterious forces attacking were severely damaged by the unexpected explosion. Incidentally, Duyuki saw the smoking ruins as the destroyed secret laboratory. Worse yet, the summoning array had almost completed its connection with the 4th apostle Caecilius, reaching nearly 99% completion. The summoning channel had already been established, but the spatial turbulence caused by the explosion created a mutation, unexpectedly resonating with a location on Earth and opening a connecting spatial channel. The 3 small golden crystals Duyuki and his friend Zhou Qiyu saw were the offerings Mingxi made to summon Casillas. However, due to the array's malfunction, when they reached for the crystals, they unknowingly completed the final step of the contract. In other words, Duyuki and his friend Zhou Qiyu were treated as summoning components and transported to Arad continent, along with the 4th apostle, Casillas. However, the summoning array failed at the last moment. The laws governing the different planes, known as the fishing net laws, severely restrict powerful individuals. Casillas, being exceptionally powerful, bore the brunt of the spatial turbulence, sustaining injuries and failing to pass through the spatial channel, resulting in the summoning's failure. Duyuki and Zhou Qiyu, being comparatively weak, slipped through the gaps in the fishing net, successfully arriving in this world. Meanwhile, while the root cause of the spatial storm acted swiftly and retreated early, only suffering from the storm's aftershocks, though temporarily incapacitated and coughing up blood, she was fortunate to survive. Conversely, the mysterious humans and mutated beasts attacking suffered heavy casualties due to the spatial storm, leaving them unable to pursue Mingxi and her group's retreat. Mingxi's desperate summoning of Casillas was an attempt to escape the dire situation of being overwhelmed by enemies. Although her summoning failed, it nonetheless achieved its purpose. From a summoning standpoint, the skill was a failure. It was remarkably successful. As a result, her prestige within the remaining team soared, establishing her as the de facto leader. Chapter 1007 The Strange Insect. Although Mingxi and the others had temporarily escaped the crisis, Duyuki, a newcomer to this world, was about to face the biggest trouble since his arrival. 5 minutes earlier, Duyuki had been hurrying along when he noticed something was amiss ahead. He looked closely and saw a mound of earth, about 10 square meters in area, bulging in the grass. The earth was fresh, clearly recently turned. Looking from afar like a new grave, the mound was trembling slightly, and strange creaking sounds emanated from within, like dozens of hard walnuts constantly rubbing against each other. At this sight, a chill ran down Duyuki's spine. It was exactly what he had feared. All along he had been praying to every god and Buddha to avoid any trouble. But his fears had come true. Had it been the Duyuki who had just arrived in this world, he might have approached, curiously digging at the earth to see what was inside. However, after witnessing the gruesome death of the driver, Duyuki was acutely aware of the extreme danger lurking in this seemingly beautiful forest. Even a lumberjack in a steel mech had died here, let alone himself. In the eyes of the monster, he was probably a walking, juicy, tender piece of food, perfect for the filling of a sandwich. Therefore, upon seeing the mound, Duyuki turned and ran without a word. He was decisively swift, without a moment's hesitation. His decisive action was undoubtedly very wise. The moment Duyuki turned to flee, the earth mound exploded, showering wet soil everywhere. A terrifying, long, thick black shadow burst forth, stretching in the air like a snake, clicking as it moved, chasing after Duyuki's back. After running only 20 or 30 meters, Duyuki realized something unfortunate. The monster pursuing him was faster. If he continued to flee, his only outcome would be to be knocked down and killed. With his defenseless back to the enemy, he had no chance of fighting back. At this thought, Duyuki's muscles trembled, his breathing quickened, his chest heaved. He gritted his teeth, let out a roar, stopped running, turned to face his enemy. "I don't want to die! I don't want to die!" These 4 words filled Duyuki's mind. Faced with the terrifying pressure of death, he wasn't crushed, but instead, a surprising courage erupted within him. Duyuki spun around, and the relentlessly pursuing monster let out a shriek as it lunged. A wave of stench washed over him, gripping his cleaver. Duyuki breathed heavily through his nostrils. Somehow, as if had practiced a million times, he instinctively used the cleaver in an upward slash. The strike found its mark. Duyuki felt a surge of force in his hand, followed by searing pain in the tiger's mouth of his right hand. The cleaver's blade collided with the creature's body with a dull thud, as if it had struck something incredibly hard. After finally deflecting the blow, he stumbled back several steps. He would have collapsed had he not braced himself against a tree. The monster had deflected, flew backward, crashing into a rock before quickly rolling to its feet. Only then did Duyuki get a clear look at his pursuer. It resembled a 2 or 3 meter long giant serpent, brown in color, but segmented like a centipede. Each segment was covered in a hard, stone-like shell with prominent spines, a terrifying sight. Its head was a giant chrysanthemum-like maw. There were no visible eyes, ears, or nose. Of course, that chrysanthemum was actually composed of incredibly sharp teeth, a sight enough to make one's hair stand on end. To be bitten, one could imagine a large chunk of flesh being ripped away in a single bite. After rolling, the monster reared up like a cobra, its segmented body making a clicking sound as the hard shells rubbed against each other. What in the world is that thing? Duyuki stared, dumbfounded. Thankfully, the success of his previous strike gave him a little confidence, allowing him to maintain his grip on the cleaver and remain on high alert. Suddenly, the monster's body tensed, its tail lashing down onto the ground. The soft grass exploded outward, soil and blades flying in a miniature detonation using the recoil. The incredibly powerful insect launched itself forward, once again attacking Duyuki. Fortunately, Duyuki had managed to regain his composure. knowing he was no match for the creature in a direct confrontation. He avoided a head-on collision. As the monster's tail whipped down, he lunged to the side, though his face slammed into a rock, sending stars dancing before his eyes and a torrent of blood gushing from his nose. He had successfully evaded the attack. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the blood, grabbing his broadsword, and preparing for another assault. But then, he noticed something encouraging. The insect wasn't unscathed. A portion of its midsection carapace was visibly fractured. From the cracks, a pale yellow fluid, dripping down its body and onto the grass below, sizzling and smoking. It was clearly the legendary corrosive acid blood. The creature's injuries must have damaged internal organs, a severe wound for any being. No wonder Duyuki had found it hiding in the dirt, seeking a dark place to recover. Chapter Xuanhuan ambush. This realization sent a chill down Duyuki's spine. Even this badly wounded monster was so formidable. If it had been healthy, he'd probably be digesting in its belly right now. Then, Duyuki observed something unusual. After regaining its footing, the insect didn't immediately pursue him. Instead, like a cobra, it raised its head, slowly turning as if listening intently. That's it! In the face of death, Duyuki's mind was remarkably clear, his brain working at lightning speed. He remembered something from nature documentaries: creatures like earthworms, centipedes, snakes, and how centipedes rely on hearing and sensing vibrations to perceive the world. This monster looked like a relative, and when he first saw it, it was hidden in the dirt, and he could see its eyes. Could this creature hunt by sensing ground vibrations and sound? Having conceived this plan, Duyuki immediately became observant. Indeed, it took considerable effort to discover that the strange insect did have eyes, hidden behind its ferocious mouthparts. They resembled dragonfly compound eyes, with a noticeable dent on the surface, suggesting injury and severely impaired vision. Searching for its target, Duyuki held his breath, remaining perfectly still. Despite this, the monster, somehow aware of the direction of Duyuki's last sound, slowly crawled towards him. Duyuki could evade it for a time. He couldn't evade it forever! Fortunately, this brief respite had provided enough information. Duyuki slowly narrowed his eyes, bending down at a glacial pace, like a slow-motion shot in a film. Sweat trickled down his temples. The insect was less than 3 meters away, its pungent stench already reaching him. Then Duyuki slowly picked up several stones from the ground. Suddenly, he hurled one towards a spot about 10 meters behind him. When the stone landed with a soft thud, the insect instantly turned its head, listening intently. Duyuki then threw 2 more stones, deliberately delaying the second one by half a second, creating a thud-thud sound, mimicking the sound of someone running. Instantly, the ferocious insect whipped its tail against the ground, launching itself towards the source of the sound. Wet mud splattered everywhere from its tail, stinging Duyuki's face. The terrifying explosive force sent a chill down his spine. As the insect charged, he himself fled in the opposite direction without hesitation. Duyuki had calculated precisely. A distance of over 10 meters now separated them. The ferocious insect, already injured, would aggravate its wounds with such exertion, making it impossible to repeatedly use this kind of explosive attack. It wouldn't be able to catch him for a while, and he only needed that little while. After sprinting for perhaps 200 or 300 meters, Duyuki stopped, letting out a long breath. Throughout his escape, he'd continuously thrown stones to disrupt the monstrous insect's hearing, successfully misleading it several times, allowing him to reach this point relatively unscathed. He turned to look at the monstrous insect rapidly approaching from just over 10 meters away, a ruthless glint in his eyes. So you want to eat me, huh? Since you dared to come here, I'll make sure you never leave! The battlefield Duyuki had chosen was none other than the spot where the mech and the traint had perished together. Even as he continued to walk slowly, the distance between them was only 5 or 6 meters. However, the pursuing insect had risen to its hind legs, swaying its head, appearing somewhat disoriented. This was because the remains of the logging mech, pierced by the traint, still emitted crackling sparks and the clanging sounds of its internal mechanisms. Duyuki's judgment had been correct. The insect hunting him relied on its hearing and sensitivity to vibrations to perceive its surroundings. With the introduction of significant external interference, and Duyuki deliberately lightening his footstep, the insect, already missiled several times by the sound of falling stones, was now utterly confused. Duyuki took a deep breath. Only one final step remained. He just needed to take one more risk to completely eliminate this life-threatening menace. Come on! Duyuki silently urged himself. Then, he suddenly roared at the insect before him. Come on, you son of a bitch! Duyuki wasn't sure if this monster understood his roar, but he was certain the creature could hear him, and that was enough. In that instant, as is the monstrous insect, upon hearing the sound, immediately raised its hard tail, slammed it against the ground, the wet soft earth sinking like liquid under the impact, then scattering outwards, immediately following. The monster's muscles and tendons tensed throughout its body. Several more streams of yellow, viscous fluid spurted from the cracks in its fractured carapace, and it lunged forward, its mandibles aiming straight for Duyuki. However, the moment Duyuki yelled, he felt as if he'd been hit hard in the jaw, flung violently backward. As his body hurtled parallel to the ground, a pungent stench filled his nostrils. Then, he saw the monster's massive body, its grotesque carapace, its bizarre limbs whizzing past his face, no more than 3 or 4 centimeters away. In that instant, Duyuki was only 3 or 4 centimeters from death. Yet, Duyuki's mood in that moment was strangely calm. He even inexplicably thought of a speeding high-speed train. Chapter 1009 Awakened Instinct. Duyuki fell face up onto the ground, his back scraping painfully against the stones. He was completely defenseless. The monster, inches away, could easily kill him with a single swipe of its tail. But a smile played on Duyuki's lips, because his tactic had worked, meaning the monster would have no chance to deliver the final blow. The secret lay in Duyuki's positioning. When he shouted to reveal his position, he happened to be standing 2 meters in front of the hole in the logging machine, which was sparking. Therefore, as long as he successfully leaned back and fell, preventing the monster from hitting him, the makeshift trap would work. The terrifying creature would crash into the machine's hole and receive a shock from the electric current. Of course, this trap was highly variable. For example, the current leaking from the damaged logging machine wasn't very strong, and the monster's exoskeleton had extremely high insulation. But life often requires a gamble, and in that moment of inspiration, Duyuki felt he had a 7% chance of success. Duyuki immediately heard the crackling of electricity and the rumbling sounds from the wrecked machine behind him, like someone was hammering the thing. Duyuki quickly rolled, got up, and was relieved to see his trap working perfectly. The monstrous insect plunged into the hole in the machine, sizzling under the electric current. Although ferocious, disgusting, and immensely strong, it was stuck, unable to escape for the moment, only able to struggle wildly, causing the dilapidated metal plates of the logging machine to creak painfully. Duyuki breathed a sigh of relief and began assessing the creature's weak points, like a butcher choosing where to cut a piece of meat. But then, with a muffled bang, black smoke billowed from inside the machine, and the electric current died. No way. Duyuki was dumbfounded. Without the current, the machine rattled and parts scattered everywhere, as if it had been disassembled. The strength of that damned insect was clearly evident. To Duyuki's dismay, the monstrous insect broke free and stood proudly on the ground. However, he keenly noticed that it was more seriously injured. Previously, its injury was just a few cracks in its waist armor. Now it was like an egg that had been heavily bumped, covered in cracks, with the core of its shell almost completely shattered. A yellowish, viscous fluid flowed continuously from its body, searing the grass and emitting constant smoke. The wrecked mech lay in ruins, silence once more descending. Duyuki knew his footsteps would again be detected by the monstrous insect, and the stalemate resumed. However, the fear and terror that had previously gripped Duyuki were gradually fading. The reason was simple. While the insect was undeniably ferocious and powerful, it had been consistently outmaneuvered by Duyuki, falling prey to every pitfall and trap. This naturally diminished his estimation of its abilities. Secondly, fear stems from the unknown. Duyuki had now gauged the creature's strength. It was far from being an insurmountable force. Even a powerful enemy becomes less daunting once its capabilities are understood. Most importantly, the insect was severely wounded. The yellow liquid flowing from its body, akin to blood, steadily seeped away. Faced with a weakening opponent, even a formidable one, Duyuki felt a surge of confidence observing the insect. Duyuki tightened his grip on the cleaver, circling it. It was a tactic used against snakes, and the creature's serpentine qualities made it readily applicable. Sensing the circling enemy, the insect grew uneasy, desperately trying to orient its head towards the threat. However, this proved laborious for a legless creature. The circling movement was a significant disadvantage. Watching the insect struggle to follow its circling prey, its pale yellow liquid blood flowing relentlessly, Duyuki felt a surge of satisfaction. He even entertained the malicious hope that it might bleed to death. Alas, life rarely unfolds. In the next second, the gigantic insect rapidly slithered several meters, lunging at Duyuki! Its speed, while reduced from its earlier tail-powered bursts, was still considerable, though Duyuki could still manage to keep pace. A dull clang resonated. The cleaver's blade struck the insect's head, but was completely deflected by its hard carapace, even rebounding slightly. Fortunately, Duyuki had already moved aside, evading the counterattack. After a few back-and-forth exchanges, Duyuki realized something. He seemed to have quite a talent for swordsmanship and knife fighting. Initially, wielding the cleaver felt incredibly awkward. This was perfectly normal, but with each use in combat, he felt his technique becoming increasingly refined. It was as if he had undergone rigorous training in the past, though it was a skill long dormant, reawakening with each passing fight. Chapter 1011 Kill. As the battle progressed, Duyuki transitioned from a purely defensive, tense, and hurried stance to one of ease and control. Conversely, the yellowish liquid oozing from the monstrous insect increasingly covered its armor, charring the surrounding ground and turning the grass to crispy brown patches. Suddenly, Duyuki executed a sweeping slash, provoking a biting attack. The slash was a mere feint, easily retracted halfway, but it successfully deceived the insect, causing it to sway its head, revealing a clear opening. Duyuki roared, wielding the cleaver with both hands and delivering a swift blow. With a power, the blade sank into the most damaged part of the insect's carapace. The strike drove the cleaver 2 or 3 inches deep, splattering the viscous yellow liquid. The insect let out a pained, muffled roar that shook Duyuki, nearly making him vomit and stumble backward. Had the insect attacked then, it might have turned the tide of the battle. However, to Duyuki's surprise, after its pained roar, the insect's response was to slam its tail against the ground, launching itself away, quickly slithering off into the distance. Took Duyuki 2 seconds to process what had happened. The thing was scared and trying to escape! This realization invigorated Duyuki. A perfect opportunity to beat a retreating foe. He immediately took off in pursuit. At that moment, Duyuki didn't realize that with his small frame, let alone engaging in such an intense fight, he had probably already exhausted most of his energy during his previous escape, let alone the fierce battle he'd just endured. How could he possibly have the strength to pursue it now? Yet, his energy seemed to endlessly surge from deep within him. Though he was gasping for breath, he was still able to keep pace. The situation had completely reversed. Now Duyuki was hunting the monstrous insect. Along the way he could clearly see the pale yellow fluid trailing from it. As if to make it even more conspicuous, where it landed, the grass hissed and smoked, burning from the corrosive liquid. With such obvious markers, losing track of it would have been incredibly difficult. Seeing this, Duyuki didn't rush. The creature was fleeing and bleeding. How much blood could it possibly lose? Pressing too hard might risk a counterattack and a reversal of fortune. In moments of danger he'd always been able to make the most rational judgments. Now, with ample time for analysis, he was even less likely to make mistakes. Except for pursuing his senpai soon, Duyuki noticed the insect had stopped, probably realizing it couldn't shake him off. He even saw the large mound of freshly turned earth again, as if everything had returned to half an hour ago. The only difference was that the hunter had become the prey. The insect reared its head and let out a ferocious cry toward Duyuki. However, to Duyuki, this display felt more like a desperate bluff than anything else. Duyuki once again circled the insect, refusing to give it a moment to rest and recover. The rest of the fight needs little explanation. Duyuki's swordsmanship was increasingly refined, while the insect's strength was noticeably declining. This disparity made the outcome inevitable. Killing the insect was simply a matter of time. 5 minutes later, Duyuki let out a sharp cry, plunged his sword down with both hands, and the yellow ichor splattered as he pinned the monstrous insect to the ground. The monstrous insect let out a shrill cry, its body wrapping tightly around the blade. Its carapace scraped against the knife with a grating screech before finally going limp and still. Dead. Duyuki gasped for air, only slowly pulling the cleaver from the insect's body after a long moment. His hands trembled violently from exertion, while the blade itself began to smoke. Its surface pitted and scarred as if rusted, a testament to the corrosive power of the insect's fluids. The damage was permanent. Duyuki checked himself over. Sure enough, his clothes were riddled with small holes, splattered with the creature's viscous fluid. He was grateful he hadn't been wearing shorts and a vest. The sheer amount of splatter would have caused serious discomfort. Knowing the tenacity of such creatures, earthworms for example, could survive being cut in half, Duyuki delivered several more blows to the insect, ensuring its demise before finally stopping. He let out a long breath and slumped to the ground, his entire body aching. His hand, clutching the knife's hilt, throbbed with pain. He saw 2 large blisters throbbing intensely at the slightest touch. Despite his exhaustion and thirst, Duyuki felt a surge of exhilaration. He had survived, against overwhelming odds. Overcoming the monstrous insect had boosted his confidence immensely, proving he possessed the ability to handle danger. After resting, Duyuki decided to leave. Before departing, he examined the insect's corpse. Had originally planned to cut off some meat and roast it, but the thought of the corrosive fluids made him reconsider. Then, he began to pry off several intact pieces of the insect's carapace. The insect's carapace had left a lasting impression. It was impervious to blades and electric shocks, yet surprisingly lightweight. If the insect hadn't already been injured, its eye ruptured. Its carapace cracked and broken. Duyuki's relentless attacks wouldn't have been enough to kill it. With the carapace in hand, Duyuki searched for vines to bind it to himself, protecting vital areas like his heart and throat. It wouldn't take long, but in a pinch, it might just save his life. While wandering nearby, Duyuki passed the large mound of freshly turned earth the monstrous insect had previously lurked within, recuperating and waiting for prey to walk into its trap. Sensing danger and the possibility of defeat at Duyuki's hands, it instinctively fled towards this very spot, subconsciously treating it as its lair. This episode is complete. Welcome to subscribe, turn on the small bell. Please leave your comments. I will continue to update the content behind.